Welcome to this discussion room. Here we're looking, obviously, what are the mapping needs of different communities, and the community of international Geneva that we are focusing on in this room are international organizations. The discussion is led by Mr. Torbjorn Fredriksson. He is a chief ICT, he's chief of the ICT policy section of UNCTAD, and he has been with UNCTAD since 2000, so a very long and rich experience, also very long and rich experience within international Geneva. Before I hand over the floor to Torbjorn to guide us through this discussion, let me share some quick housekeeping rules. This discussion is meant to be as interactive as possible. I would really like to encourage you all to switch on your video if you're able to. It's always good to see some faces and to see some interaction, to actually look into the eyes of the people that we are speaking to. So please switch on your video if you can. You can use your microphone to take the floor. However, please keep your microphone muted until you actually have the floor. On that note, if you want to take the floor, if you want to make a comment, have a question or a suggestion, you can type comment in the chat. If you don't know where the chat is, you will see a couple of icons at the bottom of your screen. One of these icons is called chat. If you click on that, a chat section will open, and then you can see the chat. So if you want to take the floor, please type comment into the chat, and I will keep note of the order of people, and I will keep note of who wants to take the floor. This is all from my side. So without further ado, I will hand over to Torbjorn to kick us off into this discussion on the needs of international organizations.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and maybe good morning and good night to some. I was asked by Diplo to moderate this breakout group, and I'm happy that quite a number of you have joined this one. And the objective here is to explore the information or other mapping needs of international organizations about other organizations and stakeholders dealing with digital policies in Geneva. I'm representing one such organization, UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, and I have been leading our work on ICT, or now digital, for development since 2008. For me, it's quite clear that effective collaboration with partners in other international organizations and in other stakeholders is essential. The fact that digital is a fairly new area for development and a cross-cutting issue, breaking down the silos is crucial. And there are already several initiatives that are already up and running and that UNCTAD is a part of. We have, of course, the World Summit on the Information Society Forum, WISIS Forum, which is co-organized by ITU, UNCTAD, UNDP, and UNESCO. And within that context, we have, for instance, the action line on e-business, which is led by UNCTAD, ITC, and UPU. All of them based in Switzerland, two of them in Geneva. We have UNGIS, which is the UN Group on the Information Society, which is currently chaired by UNCTAD and has around 30 member agencies worldwide, many of which are based here in Geneva. We have something called the Partnership on Measuring ICT for Development, which is co-chaired by the International Telecommunication Union and UNCTAD, ever since it was created in 2004. And then another example is the E-Trade for All initiative that was set up by UNCTAD about 4 years ago, which now has 32 members, again, more than 10 of them being based here in Geneva, with a shared interest in helping countries to prepare for e-commerce and the digital economy. So the way we see it is that effective collaboration is really the only feasible way to achieve scale in this area and efficiency. And for this session, we have about 30 minutes, and I'd like to invite all of you to just share your views and ideas on the following issues that are all linked to the challenge of navigating the digital landscape in Geneva. So the three core areas that we have been asked to look at are, for IOs, what kind of work or which other stakeholder groups would be of particular interest? What do we need more information about? The second is, what kind of information would you like any additional mapping or mapping initiative to cover that will be useful for you in your work? And also, from your perspective, do you think that there currently is enough awareness of the work of other IOs in digital policy in general here in Geneva? And maybe I would also add a question from myself also. Do you think that other IOs in other parts than Geneva have enough information about what Geneva is offering? We can see this currently being very important as Jovan was making a reference to the roadmap that was launched last week as a follow-up to the high-level panel on digital cooperation. And the question is, if Geneva and Switzerland-based organizations are going to be able to play the full role in support of that, do we have, do other parts of the UN system, for instance, have sufficient information about that? So please indicate if you would like to share some ideas on these issues, and I would encourage Kat to pick up some of the people that are showing interest in sharing their views. And I would just encourage all of us to be very succinct and to the point in making your comments so that as many as possible of us have a chance to interact during these 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So just having an eye on the chat, Richard Hill has made some interesting comments. So he emphasizes the need to break down silos. And in particular, he mentions the WTO, where he feels like the WTO has more work to do in trying to reach out to other organizations and break down silos. Richard, there are a couple of comments from you. Would you like to actually take the floor and briefly elaborate on them? If not, then yes, please, Richard, go ahead.
But then, since you want me to also show the video, hang on. I wasn't planning to do that. So I didn't shave. I hope that's not too noticeable.
Good to see you.
Yes, I think that actually progress is needed in most of the organizations in terms of being more open. In particular, I think the ITU should make all of its documents public. It makes a lot of them public, but not everything yet. And also in terms of participation, all the organizations, the international organizations, have some sort of vetting system, which I think is fine. Sometimes it's difficult because to get the status because you're not fully international, etc. ITU requires you to pay, and their system for exempting you from fees is pretty restrictive, so progress is needed there. And really the one that sticks out as a sore thumb is WTO, which has no provisions whatsoever for formal participation by non-state actors, not even as observers, not even as passive observers. You're just simply locked out. And many of its documents are not made public. And that's just, I think, a scandal these days. In particular, when WTO says that it wants to look into internet governance matters, which, as we all know, are supposed to be open, transparent, and multi-stakeholder. And actually, I'd like to single out Torbjorn's organization as being one of the better ones in terms of allowing participation, because even if you're not formally registered, they do find a way to let you participate, even as a speaking observer. So that's, I think, a great model of openness that should be reproduced elsewhere.
Thank you, Richard. Just to reflect on another comment in the chat by Claire Mile. She's emphasizing the need that we need to include civil society very actively, also as a topic in the breakout sessions, which is very true, also as a topic for the mapping. And I think this is something where we can definitely do more as individual organizations, but also for this mapping exercise and for the next event in this series. So it's a comment well taken.
Maybe I can
Torbjorn, over to you. Yeah.
Although, Richard, thank you for praising UNCTAD. We cannot give you more speaking time because of that, although I have some privileged role here in this context. But please, I would encourage others also to come in and share, and not least this question about, do you see that you have enough information about what's going on in the digital space in Geneva among the international organizations? Don't be shy.
Okay, I'll speak if nobody else wants to speak.
Thank you, Chengetai.
Okay, right. No, I don't think so. And I don't think also that other people or organizations know enough about what we do at the IGF So, and I definitely don't know enough about what other IGOs are doing. So it's just not from the IGO perspective or from the governmental perspective, but I think we do need somewhere, maybe some central place where everything is shown. I have not quite seen that yet. It might be out there, but I'm not really aware of it. Yeah, so that's to start things off.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. You know, this centralized place, do you have in mind something similar to what is mentioned in this digital cooperation roadmap about the help desk? Or?
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, from my understanding, the help desk is mainly for people outside to find, where to help, where to find help. But I also think it's very, very important that IGOs are aware what other IGOs are doing, so that to increase synergies, etc. And quite frankly, even myself and with your organization, I am not that aware of everything that you're doing and where we can cooperate.
Okay, very good. Let's see, any other would like to come in on this discussion?
I perhaps have someone who posted a very interesting comment in the chat, Amir Mokabaji. If you would like to take the floor, the opportunity is now. Otherwise, I can also read your comment for the discussion. Okay, so there was a comment related to the role of ICANN in relation to ITU and WTO. So that's maybe something we can come back to. In the chat, there were also some further comments on the WTO. If you don't mind, I would, because they concern matters of trade negotiations, I think I would put that to the side now, because we're really interested in kind of mapping how international Geneva relates to each other in terms of digital issues and how we can coordinate better. These comments are, of course, important. There are important issues to be raised, but maybe we put that to the side for this discussion at the moment. Okay.
Maybe C. Burgess?
Yes, would you like to come in?
Would you like to come in and elaborate a little bit on what you wrote?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name's Craig Burgess from WHO, and I know the whole session and the event is all about digital, but I wonder whether the reasons behind this is actually about data and digital. And just once you get into that way of thinking, it helps break down some of the silos. So some of the ways that we've been looking at that in WHO is trying to look at our own silos, which are often disease-specific or program-specific, looking at more the journey of data or information and what it's used from. So the journey includes obviously collection, storage, analysis, and dissemination and use. And taking that paradigm or that journey is helping to break down some of the silos of our programs, so it brings people together. And the second thing I wanted to add to this is having a firm or strong governance mechanism and structure by which it brings people together to not only collaborate and jointly work together, but also with a sense of accountability and overarching mission and purpose. So those are my two main points, just the journey of data and having a sound governance structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. But before leaving, could you just, in view of the work that you have done in WHO, did you have a feeling that it would have been helpful that you also knew more about what the other organizations in Geneva and perhaps elsewhere were doing in the same area?
Definitely, and part of our work recently over the last 6 months has looked at principles, data sharing, data policy, and we've used the Road to Bern initiative to compare and contrast many other agencies and learn some lessons and best practices and sources of information that we'd never even thought of before. So the issue of collaboration and reaching out and partnership is very important. Thank you.
Read a little bit of the comment from Amir, if I may, because he asked me to read the comments. As I said, it's about ICANN and the importance of avoiding any unilateral influence on the organization. Questions around the transformation of ICANN into a real international democratic institution based on international law and rules. The comment now relating to International Geneva is Geneva would be the best host for international governance in all its layers, for internet governance, sorry, in all its layers.
That's a question that feel free if anyone would like to pick up on what has been said also by other participants in this breakout session. Just a reflection also what Craig was talking about, this distinction between data and digital. I think nowadays it's almost impossible to distinguish between digital and data, because all things digital is generating a lot of data, which is really perhaps the most prominent feature of what we're seeing as the digital economy or the digital society that is evolving. And I think what is particularly interesting on this digital data angle is that many of the issues that we have to pay attention to when it comes to digitalization related to internet governance issues, related to human rights issues, privacy issues, trade issues, and so on, have their international organization represented here in Geneva. So from that perspective, Geneva should be a very well-placed location to have this kind of dialogues, especially across our different silos. Hope I
definitely can I add a reflection on that from my side? And it's very interesting to also note that it's not just specialized organizations that focus on issues of internet governance or digital issues that should be part of this exercise of international Geneva in the digital sphere. It's basically every international organization, and almost every, just speaking about international organizations, but then every other stakeholder. As you said, digital issues touch almost every other issue or are becoming more and more integral to these. So when we talk about mapping digital international Geneva, perhaps the map is, in the end, if we're really inclusive, going to be a very big map. So that's an interesting question. For Craig, also, I like this point about governance. How do we govern this? How do we not just create linkages, but also start working on a common ground? I think that's a very interesting point as well.
Maybe an interesting distinction here could also be made in terms of how the various international organizations in Geneva are using data, and what are the governance frameworks within and for these organizations, as opposed to how we are, as international organizations, are helping member states dealing with various digital and data-related matters.
Excellent. So we have about 5 more minutes until we go into the coffee break. So this is really the opportunity for any basically final comments or questions. I don't see anything in the chat, but I will keep an eye on that. Yes, there's a comment from Vitor. I'm going to read this in a second, but perhaps I have a quick question back to you, Torbjorn. When you, in your introduction, when you gave us this overview of the different initiatives that UNCTAD alone is involved in or is co-organizing, is co-hosting, I was already very impressed, and it already felt like there's a lot going on. So how do you, as someone who is perhaps really in charge of a lot of these things, deal with that? Because it sounds like there's a lot going on, even just looking at what UNCTAD itself is directly involved in. Do you have any advice you can share?
Well, I think a couple of advices, perhaps. One reflection is that even for an organization like UNCTAD, we have a need to be part of different types of collaboration. So I don't think it's possible to find only one form for collaboration that will solve all the issues related to digital, because there are sometimes a need for sharing of information of a policy-related nature. Sometimes it's about sharing interaction on very specific technical issues, such as in the context of statistics. But what we have learned is only when you formalize a little bit this kind of collaboration is when you really start learning about what everyone is doing and you get to know each other. If you look at the UN family, there is only one body that is focusing 100% on ICT, and that is ITU. For the rest of us, we are all affected by digital, and we have to have an opinion and support member states on digital policies. But the people inside these organizations that deal with this are typically a very small unit in the bigger whole. And I think that is reflected in WHO or in UNCTAD or in WMO or whatever, but we are all affected by digital. So I think this is why I think it's important to collaborate in order to achieve some scale and efficiency. Otherwise, we're just very small satellites within very large organizations.
Definitely. So back to the comment we had in the chat by Vito Ido from the South Center. Would you like to come in by voice, or shall I read your comment?
No, I can maybe.
Perfect. Yes, please.
I'm sorry. I just wrote down a few ideas. No, just answering to the. Well, thank you very much. I think all the comments were really, really amazing. But just this idea that we hear a lot from our delegations, that oftentimes there is the sense that some of the discussions really are very different from the real needs of what's going on in the field for particularly developing countries and LDCs. And that's why, in a sense, I feel that making sure that the voices of those countries and also minorities such as indigenous peoples should be part of even more technical discussions in a way or another. And then in terms of maybe a major gap that we feel, even in terms of legislations and including case law and data policies and ICC strategies would be useful even for crafting new models of technical assistance and other kinds of activities in general. And finally, being very straightforward, also at the South Center, of course, we don't have a specific unit dedicated to this, but then definitely we feel there's a lack of awareness and definitely sharing more experiences and every kind of collaboration is certainly very useful. So thank you. That was it.
Thank you, Vitor. And as you know, South Center is also one of the members of eTrade for All. But I would imagine that with your focus, there could be similar groupings or collaborations that could be useful on other specific areas.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, yes. It's an honor for us. Yeah.
Thank you. There's one last comment in the chat, and I think is also really the last comment for our conversation here by Firdaus. Again, would you like to come in by voice or video, or shall I quickly read the very interesting comment about data?
Yes, I can. Wait.
Perfect.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, I hope I can write it up a little bit quick because time is limited. Yeah, so because there are discussion here about data and the relation, whether we should distinguish or not. I think with the convergence technology, I don't think it's wise anymore to distinguish. But then data, as we often heard, is the oil of the 21st century. I was wondering whether it is actually, I mean, the effort is already been done by international organizations, whether you work in the cross sector or actually in regional organization, because I think we still struggle with the internet connection, because I thought that with the current progress now, the internet connection is already achieved maybe 80 or 90%. Only I know that actually is still less than 60 or maybe just say 50%. So how we gonna solve this problem when the internet connection is still not connected the whole global? But then now we need to spread how people can use the data, because this is the capital on how we can create innovation, and this is also related again with the competition law in digital economy. So in order for us to level the playing field, right? Because sometimes, for example, in developing countries, the government want to create ICT law for policy, for example, to take the tax and so on. But then what can we do for the big companies, for the I will not mention the name, but with the big transnational company, where they usually, I mean, the citizen of the developing country usually already depends so much on them, and yet the government cannot replace their role. So how does this apply? This will not happening if the level of playing field in different country, in different region is kind of the same. I assume that digital economy should make the inequality reducing rather than widening the gap. So I was wondering, what is the role of international organization in this case, in particular Internet Governance Forum? So this is more like a question, and also I think something that we need to pay attention, because I think what we see now that Corona is happening actually is a lesson learned, that maybe we need to start thinking, not just keep running and then makes people more left behind. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Firdaus. There's very, very good comments, and obviously I would agree with everything you said, and of course in in the case of my organization, UNCTAD, this question of competition law, taxation policies, data policies, all of these are crucial in order to shape the kind of digital economy that we want to have in the future. And it's happening right now. So we have an urgent need to take action here and knowing what action to take. And I think that's why it's also very important that we bring all these different perspectives together, because it is not just a trade issue, it's not just a human rights issue, it's not just and so on, an intellectual property issue or what have you. It's a very complex situation, and we need to bring in all the relevant policy dimensions into that dialogue so that we can make progress in this area. And it's of course extremely challenging, simply because the what you're referring to, the big operations and data collection activities by the global firms, is a really global issue. But competition laws, for instance, tend to be national. So there's a lot of issues here that have to be discussed. And of course, in my organization, you have a dedicated branch specifically for competition law and policy. And they are increasingly turning attention to the implications of digitalization and the performance of the big platforms and so on. So I think this is something that we will see much more of in the coming years, and we need to look at how to relate to this to make sure that we have a more inclusive outcome of the digital economy. Maybe do we need to wrap up, Kat, or what do you say?
Yes, it's time to wrap up. 2 points. We will follow up on this session with a written summary as well as with the recording. So if there's anything you would like to follow up on, you will be able to do that later. Basically 2 things. There is time for coffee now. We now have a coffee break until 2 o'clock, so 2 o'clock CET, which is 12 o'clock UTC. So we have a coffee break for the next 12 minutes, which you can use to stretch your legs, make yourself a coffee, or go to one of our dedicated coffee rooms. To navigate to the other rooms, you can go to meetings.diplomacy.edu. I just put that in the chat. There you will find the link to the coffee room. There you will also find the link to the main room, because in 11 minutes, we will be back in the main hall for another discussion in plenary before we then break out into breakout groups again. So to navigate, go to meetings.diplomacy.edu. Exactly, my colleague just posted the link to the coffee lounge and maybe also the link to the main hall directly if you can. And that's it for now. As I said, we will follow up with the summary. Thank you so much for your interventions, comments in the chat, voice and video interventions. It was really appreciated. Thank you. And thank you, Torbjorn, for an excellent lead into this topic. Obviously, we're just starting the conversation, but I think it was an excellent start. So thank you, everyone, and see you in 11 minutes in the main hall again. Enjoy the coffee.